18 relatives sat around the Easter table, but the air was thicker than the candied ham.
This Bible has held our family's names for 142 years. Tonight, it must be corrected.
She uncapped a fountain pen with the precision of a judge passing sentence.
Your marriage is an abomination against our heritage. You are no longer written here.
I couldn't breathe. The ink was still wet and my name was already gone.
She had erased that name like it meant nothing, like our marriage was a stain to be removed.
I should say something, but the words died in my throat.
We won't stay where we're not welcome.
Hand in hand, they walked out of that house and into a silence that would reshape everything. Behind them, the Bible lay open, one name crossed out, a fresh scar on a page that had survived over a century. The car door closed, and the tears Rebecca had been holding since the Bible opened finally came.
I will not let her pain be for nothing. Her parents do not know what is already in motion.
In her mind, the pen was still moving, carving a wound no one else could see.
She said my marriage was an abomination. Like she had any right to decide who I love.
They drove 2 towns over and checked into a roadside motel. The silence in the room was heavy, but not empty.
We will not let them define us. But I need you to know there are things happening that I haven't told you about yet.
What things? Lucas, tonight was supposed to be family? Whatever you have to say, just tell me.
He kissed her forehead and stepped away to take a call. She heard the words the acquisition and town block before the door clicked shut.
It was never supposed to be about revenge, but if they saw my work as a threat, that was a truth they would have to face.
Rebecca sat on the edge of the motel bed, staring at the cheap floral curtains, the faint echo of her mother's pen still scratching through her thoughts. 2 weeks crawled by. In their city apartment, the silence after Easter felt louder than any argument. Lucas was often on the phone, his voice low, his evenings consumed by calls Rebecca couldn't quite hear.
The acquisition was nearly complete. I kept telling myself the timing was coincidence. She deserved the truth, but not yet.
Then the local news alert lit up her phone. The Henderson Foundation had purchased the historic church, the funeral home, the diner, 2 entire blocks.
Acquisition. Town block. That's what he said that night. He knew. He bought my family's church and said nothing. Lucas, why didn't you tell me your foundation bought my hometown? That church? The diner? You planned this?
It was planned before we met. The foundation had been studying that town for 18 months. I didn't choose it because of your family.
But you didn't think to mention it? After they crossed me out? I had to find out from a news alert.
I was going to tell you tonight. The mission isn't about them. It's about restoring what was erased, the black families, the history they tried to bury.
Rebecca stared at him, the outrage slowly giving way to the weight of a truth she hadn't been ready to hold. His quiet power had been building long before her name was scratched from the page. In the small Georgia town, the news landed like a stone through stained glass. The Henderson Foundation had bought the church, the funeral home, the diner.
That man bought our church. Our church, Donald. This is not coincidence, it is revenge, pure and spiteful.
He is doing this to humiliate us, to show the whole town that he can take what we hold sacred. I will not stand for it.
While they raged, Catherine sat in the corner armchair, her hands folded, her silence louder than their shouting.
They don't understand what that church has seen, what I have kept hidden inside its walls all these years.
And Rebecca let him. She married that man, knowing exactly what kind of people they are. She has deserted her own blood.
Catherine said nothing. She only looked at Margaret with eyes that held a century of secrets. The town buzzed with speculation. Some whispered the foundation was a front for something darker. Others simply stared at the sold banner on the church lawn.
I will not allow this. I will go to the town hall meeting and tell everyone what sort of man has his hands on our heritage.
But Catherine, still silent, knew that the church's true story was not one they were ready to hear, and that Lucas might be the first person in 100 years to tell it. A week later, the town hall meeting was announced. Flyers taped to diner windows promised a plan that would reshape the town. Rebecca and Lucas drove into town under a low sky, the familiar streets now feeling foreign.
Every corner of this town feels like a courtroom now. I don't know if I'm the defendant or the evidence.
Don't focus on them. Focus on what we're building tonight. This isn't about your parents. It's about a truth that's been buried for decades.
They checked into the same roadside motel from Easter night. The room smelled of stale coffee and old grief. By 6 o'clock, the town hall was filling. Folding chairs scraped linoleum. The banner above the stage announced the Henderson Foundation's plan.
Let him try to explain this to the town. They'll see it for what it is, an outsider's attack on our way of life.
They're here. Mother looks like she's walking into battle. I can feel their anger from across the room.
Lucas stood backstage, straightening his jacket, the murmur of the crowd a low drone through the curtains. The room fell silent as the moderator stepped to the microphone and introduced the founder of the Henderson Foundation.
Good evening. The Henderson Foundation does not sell products. It restores memories. This church will become a community center for everyone. All of our history, under one roof.
He pressed a remote. A grainy photo filled the screen. 11 black families standing before a burning church, dated 1923.
They were driven out, and their church was burned. Their names were erased from every record until now.
This is not history. This is his excuse to tear down everything we built.
Catherine's hands trembled. She alone knew the names that had been hidden.
The commercial strip will host black-owned businesses, with rent subsidies for 10 years. A real chance to rebuild.
Some in the crowd nodded. Others crossed their arms tighter. The room was divided by an invisible line.
The stones of that old church remember what we have tried to forget. It's time to speak.
Lucas stepped back. No applause. Only the weight of a town holding its breath. The crowd began to murmur, chairs scraping, but Catherine pushed herself up from her seat with a resolve that made Margaret frown. She walked toward the stage where Lucas stood apart, her hand extended not like a parishioner, but like a woman setting down a century-old weight.
My grandmother was a black woman who passed as white in 1921 to survive. I never told anyone. Welcome to the family, Lucas.
The missing piece. The reason their hate was so sharp, it was aimed at themselves.
15 feet away, Rebecca caught the word grandmother and the tremor in the old woman's voice. Her legs felt hollow.
Grandmother? Black? Catherine's grandmother? That means we're...
The room around Rebecca blurred. The only sharp thing was the old woman's hand still gripping Lucas's, a bridge between centuries.
You have given our town a chance to remember. I needed to give you the truth.
Rebecca's knees nearly buckled. The secret she had never been told had just reshaped everything she knew about her blood. That night, Rebecca sat across from Catherine in a living room that smelled of lavender and decades of unspoken truths.
Her name was Esther, my grandmother. She married a white man and passed as his wife to survive the burnings.
The photo showed a woman who could have been either race, a deliberate mask, worn every day, even in her own home.
I never told a soul. Not my husband, not your mother. I watched the hate grow in my own daughter and said nothing.
So, when she crossed my name out, she was crossing out her own blood. She just didn't know it.
She learned that hate from my silence. I let the fear of death become a fear of life, and it poisoned every branch of this family.
All this time I thought they hated Lucas for his skin. They were running from their own.
When Lucas spoke tonight, I saw my grandmother's face in those old photographs. I knew I had to stop hiding.
The room fell into a deeper quiet. Not the silence of secrets, but the stillness of a truth finally set free. Outside, the town slept, but inside Catherine's house, a century of hiding had ended, and a new lineage began to breathe. Before the sun could set on her new knowledge, Rebecca drove to the house she had been forced to leave.
You have some nerve coming back here after what that man did to our town. What do you want?
I'm here to tell you the truth you've been running from your whole life. Catherine's grandmother was black. We are part of what you hate.
That's a lie. That old woman is losing her mind. She'd say anything to defend your abomination of a marriage.
I won't listen to this. You come into our home with this filth? You're no daughter of mine.
I was never your daughter when it mattered. The Bible proved that. But the truth doesn't care about your comfort.
Get out, and tell your grandmother she can rot with her lies. We are not carriers of that kind of blood.
Donald turned his back and walked out of the room. The door didn't slam. The silence was louder.
You can't cross out what's in your own veins. I won't hide anymore. Goodbye, Mother.
She walked out of that house with nothing but a truth that finally fit. Her name might be crossed out, but her family line had just been rewritten. Catherine arrived at the site early, donning a hard hat that sat awkwardly on her silver curls.
80 years I sat in those pews and never told the truth. Now the walls can breathe.
Inside, Rebecca sorted through hymnals while Lucas reviewed blueprints. Dust swirled in the stained glass light.
This is what resurrection looks like, ruins becoming more than they were.
The archive room will hold every record of those families. Their names won't disappear again.
Across town, some hung no trespassing signs, others brought casseroles. The divide cut deeper than any Sunday.
I should have worn this hard hat decades ago. But maybe it isn't too late.
Rebecca found a photograph behind a pew, a black couple, 1920s. She handed it to Lucas.
Every nail we drive is a small act of defiance. Her name won't stay hidden.
Outside, Catherine touched the old brick. The church didn't look ashamed anymore. Neither did she. That evening, alone in her house, Catherine reached into a cupboard and pulled out the family Bible.
I have been a coward too long tonight. The truth gets written where it belongs.
She opened the pages to the record of births and deaths. The black line through Rebecca's name stared back at her like a wound that never scabbed.
That line was never justice. It was a poisonous denial of our own blood.
She uncapped the fountain pen she had not used since her husband's funeral. Her hand was steady now.
No more hiding.
She wrote the name Rebecca in a careful script, directly above the crossed-out ghost of the old entry.
This name was never lost, only hidden.
She set the pen down and wept, not with grief, but with a release that felt like breathing after a century of drowning. The Bible lay open, the scar unchanged, but beneath it now were words no fire, no pen, and no denial could erase. 3 months later, the community center stood framed with fresh beams, but the family's rupture remained a raw crevice.
I have asked you all here because a truth too long hidden must be seen by every eye in this family.
Margaret's lips pressed thin. Donald crossed his arms so tight his knuckles went pale. They had not spoken to Rebecca since that door closed.
Open it, Rebecca. See what was always yours.
My name? Fresh ink, not a scar, and beneath it, a note I never dared to hope for.
Catherine didn't just mend a page. She stitched a wound that went back a century.
She turned the Bible toward her parents. The room became a held breath.
That is not your handwriting, Mother. You rewrote her? After everything we decided?
You decided nothing but to hide from the truth. That name was never lost, only hidden. Now it will outlast you.
Donald's mouth opened, but no words came. The only sound was the whisper of a page that had just rewritten history. Margaret's composure cracked first. A sob tore from her throat, ugly and ragged, and she pressed her palm hard against her mouth.
What have I done? All these years. It can't be true, but it is.
I will not let our family hide anymore. The shame ends with me, not with her.
This name was never lost, only hidden.
7 words that undo 100 years. She just changed everything.
Lucas reached over and closed his hand around hers. She didn't pull away.
I can't move. If I look at her, I'll have to see what I've been.
This Bible stays in the church. Any heir who wants to read it can read what was almost erased.
No one rose to leave. The silence between them was no longer angry. It was raw, unarmored, and terrifyingly new. For the first time since Easter, the room held something that felt dangerously close to the beginning of mending. In the weeks that followed, the family did not speak of mending, but they did not retreat. Donald arrived at the center one Tuesday with a toolbox and a question he could not voice.
I can't form the apology. Maybe if I fix this beam, she'll understand what I can't say.
Margaret brought a casserole to the potluck and sat in a back row, still as stone, but she stayed. Catherine's cough had deepened. She pressed a handkerchief to her lips and tucked it away before anyone could see.
Not much time left, but I've already said the one thing I needed to.
At the potluck, 4 hands reached for the same serving spoon, and for a frozen second, the room went silent.
That single second said more than any sermon. Maybe that was the apology.
Lucas saw Donald studying the archive room sketches, his finger resting on the date, 1923. Catherine sat near the altar, her breathing shallow, but her eyes held a peace that needed no words. Around the potluck table, the family moved like planets orbiting the same wound, close but never quite touching. Margaret lifted a plate of fried chicken and, without meeting anyone's eyes, walked it across the hall. She set it in front of Rebecca. No words, just the quiet clack of china on wood.
This plate is a white flag. She can't say sorry, so she left it here.
Rebecca looked up, but Margaret had already turned away. Only steam rose. Across the room, Donald caught Lucas's eye. 3 seconds. No one moved. Then Donald nodded, a downward tilt of the head that cost him more than any speech.
A nod. He gave me a nod. It's not forgiveness, but it's not a slammed door.
Catherine, watching from her chair, let a faint smile break through the tiredness. She didn't need to speak. For the first time since Easter, the family sat together at the same table. The talk was halting, but nobody left. Later, when the potluck hum had faded, Catherine took Rebecca onto the porch and they sat on the old swing.
Esther would have loved this sunset. She spent a lifetime watching them through a window of lies.
I still can't believe you carried that secret alone. All those years, and you never once let it break you.
I'm ready to let it go now. The secret isn't mine to carry anymore, it's just history. And you're the proof that it didn't destroy us.
Thank you for restoring my name. When I saw it in your handwriting, I felt like I existed again.
That name was always yours. I just put it back where it belonged.
The swing creaked once. A soft wind lifted the corner of the photo album, and neither of them spoke.
When the time comes, I want you to have the album and the Bible. They belong with someone who won't hide.
Rebecca took the old woman's hand, fragile now but warm, and held it until the fireflies rose. It was not goodbye. It was the first honest inheritance the family had ever been given. The morning of the grand opening broke bright and still, the new sign catching the sun like a promise. A crowd had gathered, black and white, old and young. The same room that had once held only breath now held expectation.
This building was once a place of exclusion. Today it becomes a home for everyone willing to walk through its doors.
Beside him, Rebecca held the ribbon steady, her fingers light on the satin, her eyes sweeping the faces in the crowd.
I don't know how to wear this pride. It pinches like an old dress, but I am still standing here.
Donald stood a few feet apart from Margaret, his hands buried in his pockets, his gaze fixed on Lucas.
My grandmother would weep to see this. All those hidden faces finally named in the light.
Together, Rebecca and Lucas lifted the giant scissors. The blades closed, and the ribbon fell apart like a final clean cut. Applause rippled through the crowd, and Margaret's hands rose, slow and uncertain, to join the sound. The doors swung open. The first community center this town had ever shared stood ready, not to erase the past, but to hold it honestly. As the crowd thinned into the new center, Margaret found Rebecca near the archive room door.
The words are stuck in my throat, like thorns, but if I don't speak now, I will choke on them forever. I was wrong. I was so afraid of what we were. I couldn't see who you are.
The words fell between them, raw and unpolished. Not the confession of a woman who had found grace, but one still trembling at its edge. Margaret's hand lifted, then stopped short of Rebecca's arm. She couldn't finish the reach.
It's not a full apology, but it's more than the Bible ever gave me. I hear you. Thank you.
For a long moment, neither moved. The gap between them was still there, but it was no longer a chasm. Then Margaret nodded, once, and walked away into the noise of the celebration, leaving behind the first honest words she had spoken to her daughter in over a year. In that unfinished apology, a new beginning had been planted, fragile, but rooted in something that had never been there before: the truth. In the archive room, Lucas stood before a shelf of old records, the faint smell of dust and new paint mixing in the air. A shadow fell across the doorway. Donald, hands in his pockets, stepped just inside and stopped.
It's just a room full of paper. Why does it feel like walking into a confessional?
He cleared his throat, the sound sharp in the quiet. Lucas turned but said nothing, letting the silence hold.
You did good for this town.
It wasn't warmth. It was the kind of respect a man gives when he's too stubborn to offer more.
He came to say that. It's not an apology, but it's an opening. We did.
Donald nodded once, the same downward tilt he'd given at the potluck, but this time his eyes held something that wasn't anger. For a moment, the archive room held nothing but the dust and the quiet of two men standing on the same side of history at last. Catherine passed in her sleep a month later, as quietly as the secret she had carried for 84 years. Her funeral filled the church with faces black and white, old neighbors and new friends all drawn by the truth she had finally set free. On the altar lay the family Bible, open to the restored page, the fresh ink a stark reminder of what had been mended. The minister read the words Catherine had written. This name was never lost, only hidden. The congregation held its breath, then a soft wave of weeping rose from the pews, not of grief alone, but of release. Margaret and Donald sat together, her hand resting on his for the first time in months, their shoulders touching. Rebecca gripped Lucas's hand so tightly her fingers left marks, the photo album Catherine had given her resting in her lap. After the service, people filed past the Bible, touching its worn leather as if to absorb a century of truth with their fingertips. The Bible was then placed on a wooden shelf beneath the community center sign, where anyone who walked in could read what had been restored. In that sunbeam, the ink Catherine had written glowed, a quiet testament that no name truly stays lost when someone loves it enough to bring it back. A year later, in their own house on the edge of town, the family Bible sat on a shelf in the living room, its open page catching the afternoon light. Rebecca paused in the doorway and let the sight of it stop her, as it always did.
That page used to be a wound. Now it's a window.
Lucas stepped in behind her, a bundle wrapped in soft yellow blankets nestled in the crook of his arm.
She's so peaceful. Our daughter will grow up knowing her name was always meant to be here.
The baby stretched a tiny fist, and Rebecca leaned over to press her lips to the soft crown of her head.
Welcome to the family, little one. You'll never have to hide.
Lucas smiled, the kind of smile that starts deep and settles slowly. Together they stood before the shelf, 3 generations held in the hush of that room. The sunbeam shifted slightly, illuminating not just a name, but a promise kept. The old Bible rested on the shelf, its open page holding the afternoon light like a vessel waiting to be filled. The handwritten note was clearer now than ever before, each letter a deliberate act of reclamation.
And now it's found.
The sunbeam flared, and the ink seemed to pulse with a warmth that had nothing to do with fire. The light stretched across the room, brushing the baby's yellow blanket, Lucas's sleeve, Rebecca's damp cheek. For a stretched minute, the only sound in the house was the infant's steady, tiny breathing. Slowly, the sunbeam withdrew, pulling back into the window as if its work was done. The the page dimmed, but the restored name held its shape against the shadows, proof against erasure. In the gentle dusk, the Bible seemed to exhale, its leather cover settling into the wood grain of the shelf. And the name Rebecca remained, no longer crossed out, no longer hidden, simply, finally home.